Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are ya? I'm really excited about this interview. We went almost to the full hour. I wanted to talk about other things. As we're recording, I realized that I should have given you a bigger introduction to my guest, Dr. Zeisner. And I just have to know that done is better than perfect. I am going to come on at the end and kind of be a little bit lengthy because there's a lot going on right now. Today was the Presidential Inauguration. I meant to talk about it in the recording. My tasky brain was on. I want to talk about that. Today's episode, we talk about what the qualities of good leaders are, and these are all traits of being a highly sensitive person. And when I heard Dr. Zeisner talk about this on TikTok, I asked if she would come on the podcast because we have so many gifts and strengths, and we really do make excellent leaders. And even if we're talking about in our relationships or as parents or coworkers, this is an amazing episode, and we did not get to finish all of the qualities. And so at the end, I'm also going to come on, provided I remember what I'm going to use as an excuse after COVID. I don't know. But I want to name the other qualities that we didn't get a chance to talk about because these are really powerful. And my hope is that if you are someone who's not so sure that you have a lot of gifts and strengths, maybe you just found out about the trait, maybe you've got wounding or trauma from childhood, I am going to put all of this in the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com. Just go to the podcast page and click on Dr. Zeisner's episode. And in the show notes will be a list of all these qualities. I would like to encourage you to write them down and put them where you can see them because we absorb so many negative messages and internalize them that I think it's really important to fully embrace all of the amazing qualities that we have. If you are not aware, we have a closed Facebook group called Unapologetically Sensitive. Just to let you know, I have a page called Unapologetically Sensitive. I have a closed therapist group called Unapologetically Sensitive Therapist Group. The group that I'm telling you all about, provided you're not a therapist, is just called Unapologetically Sensitive, and there are 3 questions to ask. It's an amazingly supportive community, and it's just for you, the listener. At the end, Dr. Zeisner talks about 3 qualities that make up resiliency, and the third one is a positive disposition. Because we were running low on time, I didn't want to take extra time to talk about this, but I do want to come on at the end and just share a little bit about it. If you've listened to me for a while, you know what my thoughts are. But I do want to add something to that because we often have deep feelings and have gotten messages about we're not being positive because we feel hurt and angry and frustrated and disappointed. And there's a way that we can embrace that and have it be okay. And just because of time, there were so many things I wanted to add in. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Zeisner. Dr. Catherine Zeisner is a proud Canadian scholar practitioner who believes the best in education is right around the corner. As an assistant professor at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington, Catherine teaches graduate students, is a published scholar, and teaching award winner. Catherine believes all students can learn and all teachers can thrive in our diverse educational settings. Catherine knows relationships are the key to school success by bridging the gaps between what's needed and what's possible. Anything is possible if you have the right people in the right room at the right time, focusing on the right things. Dr. Zeisner has a very simple message for educators around the world. Push up. Behaviors that respectfully challenges the status quo, engages a wide community, and gets others to think differently. The kind of difference that provides success for students tomorrow, today. I think you're really going to like this. And what I love is we have so many gifts and strengths, and this episode really talks about many of these in different ways that we haven't talked about before. And now, on to the show. Hey, Catherine, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here to talk with you and your fans.
I am so excited to have this conversation with you today. Let's start where I always start. Do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
Yes, I'm 16 on the scaling chart.
Okay. And I had to go look because I just don't pay attention. So I think 14, if you score 14 and above, Dr. Aaron considers you a highly sensitive person.
Yeah.
I got that sense from you, but I never know.
Yeah. And when I think back to my childhood and, the questions made me really reflect on experiences that I've had, how I respond to experiences, what I like, what I appreciate. And I love the fact that I'm a highly sensitive person because I find that I can be more empathetic and I have unbelievable instincts when it comes to other people and how they're feeling.
Absolutely. And that's part of, we have more active mirror neurons. We have higher, we tend to be very empathic, very emotionally responsive, which is what I enjoy. Like, it's not like I saw you on TikTok and I'm like, I pulled out my checklist to go like, oh, this is what she had. But I find that those are the qualities that I'm drawn towards, and that your depth and your understanding and your compassion, when you talk about the things that you talk about, I'm like, oh, I really like that. I want to hear more.
Yeah. I like the fact that I've become a very reflective person as opposed to an overthinker, which I find can be unhealthy. Now it's more of this idea of looking and being able to reflect back on how I can control a situation. And I'm trying to make that come across to people, being a better listener, therefore able to then respond better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds great. What we're going to do today is, I saw you do a TikTok on the qualities of great leaders, and I heard them and they sounded very much like the traits of being a highly sensitive person. So when I reached out to you, we talk about strengths a lot on the podcast, but we don't talk about them in terms of leadership. And so many of the qualities that you listed are also traits of being a highly sensitive person. My hope is that as you're listening to this, you may be thinking, I'm not a leader, I'm not a supervisor. In your job, in your relationship, with your kids, with your friendships, these are all traits that we have. And as we talk about these qualities, I really want you to think about where these show up for you. And if you have a lot of self-doubt, then there's that, your gremlin is going to be like, I don't do that all the time, or that's not me. I really hope that you can suspend that gremlin-y chatter and really see where you do see these showing up. And it's not 100% of the time, but these are all strengths that we have. You and I have a list. I see you just nodding your head as we're talking. So did you want to add words to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the big thing is, as opposed to a quality, I like to refer to them as competencies, that I'm very competent in that skill. And the first one that always pops up on any survey of people who have a leader and are a follower is empathy. That's a competency, a skill, a trait, some knowledge that they wish their leader to have and to model. And it's because the world today requires people to be thought of in a kind, generous, graceful way. And people who demonstrate and have the skill of empathy do that. They look at someone as a whole person, not just as an employee or not just as a teacher, in my case, as an educational leader, but I look at them as a mom. I look at them as a partner. I look at them as a friend. And on almost every survey that we've been able to find, empathy is expected from a leader, and most importantly, respected as someone who people want to work for and with.
I love that.
And it on the sensitive chart is really one of our skills and competencies and traits too.
Yeah, it's one of the 4 core characteristics that Dr. Aaron identified, and we are incredibly empathic. And I think when we don't know how to manage that and we don't have good boundaries around our empathy, then it can be problematic. But that's about wounding. That's not about the trait of being a highly sensitive person. And I always like to tease that out. So, all right, give me more. More, please.
Another one. The next one is listener. So I often talk to people about, when you're trying to resolve conflict, when you're trying to support someone who's going through a difficult time, to use the words, I hear you and I'm listening. Because they're 2 different skills. I can hear anybody. But for someone to truly listen, it means they're able to respond. It means they're able to ape back what you said. It means they're able to potentially work with you to create a list of solutions. It means that they're able to not respond and just allow the opportunity for you to be in a safe space. So the skill of listening, and there's so many different ways that people describe listening, whether it's active listening, compassionate listening, quiet listening, depending on the researcher and the way it wants to be used, and really the industry in which you're using it in. rates extremely high by people who want to work for someone in a leadership position who has that competency.
I love that. And how many of you as a listener have had people come and they tell you their life stories? You'll be sitting on a bench somewhere that people just get this sense of safety from us and they tell us all kinds of stuff.
And they say, you're such a great listener.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It just it exudes from us. And whether it's almost in alignment with being empathetic, which is we make eye contact, we bring our body in a little closer, we create that safe space. I think it's all part of the fact that we want to be with you through whatever it is that you're going through. Whether it's a difficult time, whether it's something wonderful, whether it's a celebration, that the lean in, the listening ear, the eye contact, potentially sometimes body language, makes people feel safe.
Right.
And whether you're a mom or a sister, an employee, a partner, a leader, you want people to feel safe around you because then hopefully you're more approachable. People then will want to work hard for you. People will champion you when you're not in the room. So those two skills, which make people want to do well for you, then 99% of the time makes the situation better, whether it makes your family stronger, whether it makes a better relationship, friendship, or whether it makes a better organization.
Yeah. What I see, and this is true for me and the clients that I work with, is there's just such a longing to be seen and heard. Do I matter? Am I important? And this is so crucial in any relationship, and the competencies that you're talking about really allow others to have that sense of feeling seen and heard. And that is something that creates safety. Then we go like,
then they can thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that what we want as a leader? The people whom which we lead to be thriving, not just surviving and not just being, but thriving, right? That's what resiliency is. It's not only just, surviving, it's bouncing back and bouncing back better. And I just love the fact that if you're demonstrating the authenticity of those skills and competencies and people feel safe, they're going to thrive. Think about that as a parent, how your children then can thrive. And isn't that what you want? No matter what passion they're choosing, whatever purpose it is, whether it's the arts or music or athleticism or intelligence or creation, whatever, you want them to thrive in that passion.
Yeah.
So we need to be exceptional listeners and exceptionally empathetic.
Yeah. And if you're in relationships where people tell you that you've upset them, you've disappointed them, you've hurt them, that there's conflict, that is often an indication that we've created safety, that people feel that they can come to us and tell us that. And so often when parents have kids that will assert that they see something differently, parents see that as insubordinance or not being respectful. There are a lot of ways that this shows up, but we want to raise children to be independent adults that have their own thoughts and can challenge the system, challenge adults respectfully and appropriately. So it's a really healthy skill to have.
I like to call it self-advocacy skills. And I want to see children as young as 2 and 3 to be able to advocate for what they need, whether it is a hug, a drink, a sleep, all the way to support, money, forgiveness. And I often, when I'm in my role as administrator of a school, talk to families about what are you doing to encourage, support, and ensure your child can self-advocate. Because I've seen it too often in which parents speak for their child. They won't allow me to speak to their child. They create this barrier where they feel their child's going to be, it's going to be too hard. It's going to make their child upset. That's the biggest celebration I host in my office, is when a student, even a parent who comes down and says, this is what I need. Because often I will say, what do you need? And often in schools, we can help people with some money and some resources and some time and a listening ear. But we want students, children, people to be able to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
First of all, it's because then we can see that they have an awareness, a self-awareness, and then more importantly, that they're able to verbalize their needs.
Yep. Over the holidays, we got to recreate the family dance that we do. Just delightful. I've got twins that are 20 years old, and one of my sons, who does not like conflict, told me that he was very upset with something that I'd done that had to do with my other son and what we had agreed to do as a family with COVID. And as much as it stung, I told him how much I appreciated that he was able to tell me that. And I thought, good job, Mom. I've created a safe environment that this adult, this man-child, who really does not like conflict, was able to tell me that he was really not happy with my behavior. That is what we want.
Well, the sharing of one's feelings should not necessarily mean it's going to be a fight. Mm-hmm. The sharings of one's feelings should be, well, it's interesting. Our next skill is humility. Our next competency is we want leaders to be humble. As a parent, when your child shares a feeling with you, there should be a celebration. You should be able to say, thank you. I hear you. I appreciate that. Now, what would you like to do with that? What can we do with that feeling? Mm-hmm. Because we can't tell someone they're feeling wrong. But, you're upset? Oh, you're not allowed to be upset. I'm angry. You're not allowed to be angry. If someone's upset and they're angry, then they're upset and angry, and we have to acknowledge that feeling. Mm-hmm. But I'm always happy when I hear parents say, my child confided in me, my child addressed it, my child shared, because it means that you were approachable, just like we think about a leader in a business and organization. But then you as a parent, are you humble enough to apologize if that's what it needs, to walk away if that's what it needs, to get them some other resources that maybe you don't have, another person in some cases. And so I'm always proud of parents when they're able to come and say, my child wants this and needs this. And I was humble enough to listen, and I had to apologize. Well, good. That's what we do when we hurt people or people share with us that they're feeling hurt. And then you moved forward and you model how do you move forward.
Yep.
Which is also an exceptional skill as a leader. If you want people to do better and be better, you have to model the skills and competencies that you wish them to demonstrate.
We have themes often that go on in our lives. And this week, the theme has been, you're right, I'm sorry. End of sentence. And really having to sit and look at my behavior and look at where that shows up without defending, without explaining, without wanting to get into, well, you're right, I'm sorry.
But isn't that nice that you have a family environment where people can share that? One of the things that I was called early on from friends and family was my tone. Sometimes it can come across as flippant, or often I just think I'm being passionate, but it does sound rude or aggressive. And once my friends started to feel comfortable to say, your tone is making me uncomfortable, your tone makes you sound and look angry, man, did I ever feel good that I could take the beat, as I like to say. Take a beat and think back a second. Yep, that was disrespectful tone, or that was too loud, or that was, I was putting the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. What a wonderful feeling to be then reflective and to move forward. And then the next time that situation comes up, to be humble enough to have changed or grown, as I like to say. It's hard to change, but it's easy to grow.
Right. And one of our strengths is depth of processing. When we are told about our behavior, we really have an amazing ability to really reflect and look at, where does this behavior show up? Does it show up in all my relationships? Where oftentimes people don't have that ability for insight and to really look at their behavior. And this is something that we are really, we excel at. The depth of processing is probably one of the most prominent parts of being a highly sensitive person.
I like to picture a hub of a wheel with a hub, and then I'm sitting in the hub, and I often will then go down each of the spokes. Like you said, am I doing this at work? Am I doing this with this group of people? Am I doing that in my committee work? And I just sort of picture myself radiating out in these different places and getting that idea of, I probably am. If I'm doing it here, I'm probably doing it here. And then it makes that circle more complete when the behavior has grown into a much more respectful behavior or stronger behavior or a better competency. So I often picture a wheel.
I love that. As you were talking, I was thinking, I'm so busy surviving right now that skill is just, I'm just not there. I'm just surviving right now. And if I can show up and get what I need done. So that's something to think about for the future. I'm glad you're able to do that. I mean, you know what that tone means, right?
100%.
Okay. What's another competency?
Well, lead by example, like we just talked about, being able to model. The hypocrisy I see sometimes in my office from families where a teacher will come to me and say, I'm so frustrated with my class. Their desks are so messy and they can't find anything and they're always losing things. And then I walk down and look at the teacher desk and it's a disaster. And it's this idea of a leader recognizes that what they're portraying, what they're doing, walking and talking, is going to be radiating out. You are the temperature. You are the barometer. You are what's happening in the building. And if you're twitchy, as I like to say, or if I'm messy, figuratively and literally, then the building is too. And often I would see it. I'd be like, I could sit in my office and I would hear the building erupting. And I'm like, oh, it's because I was on the announcements this morning. I was very short and very flippant. I wasn't as friendly as I normally am. I didn't tell the daily joke. I had some tone, and it just created these waves in the building. And I just want leaders and parents and friends and people head of committees to say to themselves, if it's not going well and I'm in charge, what is it that I'm doing that's creating those waves of lack of success, of people being upset, of things not getting done? And am I modeling that? Am I handing things on time? Am I being neat and tidy? Am I being appropriate? Am I sending out agendas on time? And just that idea of making sure that we're matching our expectations with what we're putting out. So this whole idea of being a model, especially in leadership, because otherwise, very quickly, people will say, you're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And as soon as you get a label, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And look, think of it as a parent. When your child has said to you, you're a liar, you're a hypocrite, you're fibbing or whatever, some of those really harsh judgments that some often are true, man, it's hard to come back from that the next time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with the leader.
Yep.
So making sure you're walking the talk.
We also have an opportunity to model vulnerability, authenticity, what we do when we make a mistake. That some of my deficits are around paperwork and kind of just losing track of things. In some ways, I'm very competent. In other ways, I just have some major deficits. And when I start working with my groups, I just make it really clear that these are some things that I struggle with. So if I forget, please feel free to remind me. And it creates safety that people then feel like they don't have to be perfect and they can have areas that they don't have to excel in everything. And so it's another way that we create safety and just normalizing. We all have our stuff.
I love that. And putting it up front, right? I think sometimes when I would walk into a new school, we would have sort of the June meeting where I got to meet everybody. And I have a bad habit of cursing. I've really stopped since I've moved into higher ed, but for a while there, because I'm a little intense and pretty passionate. And I would say, I just want to put it out there that I apologize now if I curse. I want to make sure that you're receiving the apology now, but I do it. It's a bad habit. I've been working on it my whole life. In education, if we're not angry, we need to be, if we're not laughing, we're crying. And I want to stay in the laughing section. And then often, I'll say, please also look for this. I like things in advance. I'm going to send emails of communication. You're going to see me walking around. It's interesting, as an empathetic person and a highly sensitive person, I like to let people know because I want them to be emotionally prepared to be in my presence. You need to know I'm big and bold and beautiful and I'm a big presence, that I am loud, that I do talk with my hands, I am passionate, to let them then be prepared for how our relationship is going to grow. Whether we're going to be friends or whether we're going to work together, I like to let people know up front too. But usually it's about my personality as opposed to some of my qualities. Mm-hmm. Because to me, personality and qualities are different. So, but I would share, I'm always on time. I'm going to start and finish on time. I will honor that. So yeah, I do that too. I do tell people up front, and I will say I wear my heart on my sleeve. I use the 24-hour rule. If I get upset, I'm going to be upset for 24 hours and then it's over. Isn't that interesting? I think that's all part of being transparent. Mm-hmm. Is also an exceptional leadership skill, especially in working in an organization. The more you can give people who work with you, the safer they will feel. Yep. Sometimes I think in a family, there's some boundaries to keep. There's some things I don't feel children need to know at certain ages. And as I say, there's adult problems that need to stay adult problems. But to be transparent about your decision-making process, about your relationships, about how you make decisions, I think, again, people will then feel safer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't it interesting? All of our ideas are coming back to this idea of how do we make others feel safe? when a lot of what we've done in our lives is to keep ourselves safe.
Right.
That reflective piece you and I talk about, we look in the mirror and it comes back.
Right. And there's often this sense of, I can't let people know who I am, and that's how I present as powerful and having everything together. And the truth is, I mean, we have to know where our limits are and we have to be solid in ourselves. But when we do these things that seem like they're vulnerabilities and would make somebody appear weak, it really is a tremendous strength that allows other people to show up just as authentic, to have these really deep relationships, whether they're work relationships or personal relationships we model. And when we make mistakes, we own it. Or if we're in a process of something, we're doing merchandise for the podcast and I'm working with my team and we're getting some of the samples back and they're not washing out well, or we're having problems. And there's this part like, I should have known this ahead. Like we should have ordered all 40 items ahead of time and washed them and put them in the dishwasher. It's impossible. And it's a really good opportunity to go like, this is how we learn. This is the first time we've done merchandise. This is and everything that doesn't work, we pull from the store, and we're practicing imperfection, because how do you know when you do something for the first time?
Absolutely. Yeah. Which is different from excuses. For example, when someone says to me, I'm always late, that doesn't make it okay. Just because you're announcing that doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean I'm going to excuse it. You're an adult. There's requirements. You need to be present for your colleagues. This idea where people give the sweeping statements of excuses bothers me, because first of all, lateness bothers me. But when someone goes, she's always late, or they're always late, that's not good enough for me. We're adults. We can be better.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Next competency.
Decisiveness. So let's talk about why decisiveness is important as a family member. Why do you think that? Because you think of that, your mom. Why would your family want you to be someone who can make decisions?
Well, we talked about this before we recorded. This is the one trait that I think may be challenging. And I'm trying to decide, as we're talking about this, is this about wounding or is this about being the trait of highly sensitive? And I think it's more about being highly sensitive, that we want to weigh all of the angles. We want to chew things over. And I think that it's okay. Often what I have to do is to say, this is my decision for now, and I have the right to change it. Because that sense of having to make the perfect decision can really create paralysis, and knowing that under the circumstances and in a family, we're always free to re-choose and to reevaluate and to renegotiate. And there are certain things that I think decisions come very easily to us, and we can be very decisive. And I think there are other areas where there's so much junk that gets in that filtering process. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, what I've learned in education is it's gray. It really is not black and white when we're talking about people. The idea that everyone is different, everyone has different strengths and different opportunities and different needs. So I can't be using necessarily the same decision with every person I meet, but I need to use the same decision process with everyone. That makes people feel safe. That shows that I'm setting I don't want to screw up and make a precedent decision. But I use the same process, which is I take my time. I ask as many questions as possible. I weigh out the possibilities of solutions and problems. I ask for a lot of input from others. And then I make the decision. And then, like you, I am open to the possibilities of it needing to be changed if more information comes our way. But I try and take as much time as possible so that maybe some of that extra information comes in that time anyways. But I think we've all worked with or for someone who doesn't have a process. They're willy-nilly. They say yes to this without thinking about it, and they say no to this after thinking about it for 6 weeks. That makes me feel anxious. That makes me feel upset. That makes me feel angry. But if I know that the person I'm working with or spending time with makes a decision based over a reasonable amount of time, that they weigh finances, that they weigh people's emotions, that they weigh the impact that this has on their life, and I see that decision process over and over again, awesome. That's honorable to me. Who am I to say that that's not right? But I'm more impressed that they have a process and a decision eventually gets made, especially when we're deciding things about children.
Right. And there isn't one gray rule. It's two things happen that when you started talking, before I could even it was very unconscious that my first thought was I gave the wrong answer and like started to not a major shame spiral, but that thing of like, there was a right answer and I should have known it. And I thought, okay, isn't that, using mindfulness? Oh, isn't that interesting? Okay. So let's let that go. And thinking how many of us have trauma and shame from the education system of thinking that there was one right or wrong answer and there's not. So that's one thing. The other thing that we may need to do is to say, let me get back to you on that. That I often know that I need to filter. And now that I've got kids that are 20, they often will call because something happens that they, kind of like not a big emergency, but a little emergency. And I'll tell them, and then I get off the phone. And once my brain has a little bit to process, I'm like, oh, this is what they need to do. And so I know sometimes they just need a little bit more time to kind of let the tabs in the back of my mind run.
Often I'll say to people, when they ask a quick question, they're going to get a quick answer, and it not necessarily will be the right one. So again, I put that up front, put it in writing, tell me when you need the decision by, and I will get it to you probably by that time, unless I need to buy more time because we need more information. But again, share your process, right? So children call, I'm in the middle of 4 things. Let me write that down. And then I'll get back to you by 4:00 with a decision, whatever it is. But again, being transparent about your process.
Yeah.
Because I remember my parents making decisions about, I was going to move to France and I was going to go do this job and that job. And it used to be frustrating because my dad would give an answer right away. No, you're not doing that. And then my mom would say, well, let's sit down and make a positive and negative list. And let's weigh the factors of how this affects your brothers and stuff. And I always appreciated that. Even though it slowed the process down, I knew my dad's answer wasn't right because he just automatically decided. But my mom had a very methodical decision-making process, which I can't even tell you how many people I've shared that with. Well, let's make a positive, negative list if we should do this vacation or if we should change jobs. And it just seems to work. And then it also, again, makes people feel safer and that they feel they've invested time into making a decision. Mm-hmm. So they're not flippant.
Yep.
Right?
Somebody close to me automatically just says no. I mean, that's just like their first. And it took me a while to catch on like, oh, I'm going to get a no the first time. And then I know that I just need to drop back, give them some time, and then they come around. So that's the other thing of Correct. Being able to notice if there are patterns with how people respond to decision making.
One of my favorite movies is My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Mm-hmm. And the dad, who's a fantastic actor, of course, in the whole movie, was he was the decision maker of the family, but the mom and the daughter knew how to, I hate to use the word manipulate, but use a process to get him to make it feel like it was his decision, even though they already knew what they wanted. And it was a talent where they would talk about it amongst themselves, then approach the dad and make him feel good about himself and tell him how wonderful of a dad he was. And they describe themselves as the dad may be the head of the family, but the women are the neck. And it's you could talk probably about it wonderful in a sociology class for a long time about buying that time with somebody by coming to them with more information so they can't make a decision right away and waiting for them to process it, because we could talk about how processing speed of people. We expect people to be quick processors, and many people aren't. I'm a very slow processor. So is my dad. But he would decide quickly because I think he just had so much going on that he wanted it off his plate. And I think as a principal, I did that too. I had 26 things happening right now. I can eliminate these things if I just make quick decisions, and the decision probably wasn't right. And it was just an interesting way about these women knew how the dad made his decisions, and it needed to come from him. And I might have learned that over the years, instead of asking for a yes or no, to say, let's talk about this opportunity, as opposed to, can I do this? Mm-hmm. So I think even as someone who works with leaders or in families, almost changing your wordage. Mm-hmm. Say, can I do this? It is a yes or no answer. Whereas, can I talk about this opportunity? It is a discussion.
Yeah, that's a great insight.
I think as a highly sensitive person, I've learned over the years about what I need to do to get what I need, which is usually a conversation about things, as opposed to I don't need a decision right away.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, let's do another.
Adaptable. What do you think of adaptable?
I think that HSPs really have the ability to adapt and be flexible. And we do like structure and routine. So being able to know that many of us do better with structure and routine, but when we're given an opportunity to rethink something, and I think when it's here's what I think. And if I'm wrong, shoot me an email and tell me. I think when we look at it in terms of problem solving and coming up with solutions, then that adaptability and flexibility can really come into play. And I think it's easy to default to rigidity if that's how we were raised.
Or recognizing there's some wonderful opportunities that could be missed out on. So I require extensive routine and structure, but because I have routine and structure, I'm able to be adaptable. There's a little irony in that. So because I like to have my day planned out, I know my car is always full of gas. I've already brought my lunch and packed it. If someone says, can you do this after school? I can go do it because I know I can. My car's full of gas. So it's interesting how they really relate to each other. Here, let me give you a silly example here. So I'm an assistant professor here at Gonzaga, but I also have a second role called faculty in residence, which means I actually live in a residence with currently about 60 first and second year students. There's 5 of us on campus who live in the various residences, and our role is to help students see that professors are real people. We do our laundry in our pajamas. We play ping pong. Well, there's often a fire because they cook popcorn or they cook bacon. And I've made a few TikToks in which I videotaped myself outside with the firemen because I always joke about I love to see firemen. But I came back in after one of the false fire alarms, one of the TikToks, and I said, you know what? I'm glad that I have structure and routine, because when a fire alarm goes off and you have a dog and you're trying to ensure that 60 kids are safe, the fact that my shoes are by the front door, my purse is hung up ready to go, I know where my keys are, my dog keeps his collar on, and we're able to get out very quickly within 3 or 4 seconds. I'm happy that I'm that kind of person. But if there's a fire alarm, that's okay too. We can get out. So they're related. They're really related. And I don't think I've ever had anything like like OCD. I've never had a diagnosis of that, and I don't understand that, and I appreciate people who are able to recognize that in themselves. But I do like to go to bed knowing my keys are hung up, I have my shoes ready to go, my purse is where I said it is, but from a safety perspective, that if something happens, I'm able to get out. And on 3 occasions, we've had 3 separate fire drills, and I've been able to do that. I feel confident that I can be safe. So yeah, being structured, but being able to be adaptable.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I've seen those TikToks, and when I go to bed, I've had this thought like, not prepared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't have clothes near the bed, shoes. Because of some deficits in my executive functioning, there are things that I'm very routine about, that there's a place where my keys go, there's a place where my glasses go, that those routines are really important. Otherwise, I would be losing things all the time. But it's funny, I've thought about that. And my husband and I joke that I get below a half a tank in the car, and I'm like, I'm low on gas.
Yeah. But you never know, especially if you have family out of town and you have to drive. A school example is when I was the principal of the last school that I led. It was a grade 4 to 8 school, beautiful rural school right on a highway, beautiful building. But when I arrived, they weren't using technology to communicate. And there's various apps where one person can send a text to multiple people at a time. And I was using something called the Remind app. It was so awesome. It was free. It was anonymous. So people, like, I wouldn't get your phone number. You just registered receiving a text from me. And it was cool for our community, right? Oh, I could text the principal, and the principal's telling me everything that's going on at school. And I would send out reminders, and it was great. But I said to the staff, I want to have a staff one too, so that we can send a message to everyone on staff. I'm sending it to the community and they love it. But it'd be nice if every one of you registered your emails, and because I knew everyone had a phone. So I could send quick messages to you too, confidentially, so the children couldn't hear. I could get on the PA and say stuff. And they fought me on it a little bit. And eventually we got everybody on it. And, I tried not to send messages to them. I didn't want to interfere. I really wanted to use it for emergencies only. And of course, one day in, I think it was October, we had a tragedy that happened outside of the school. There was a horrific traffic accident. And what it meant was the school buses couldn't come pick up the children. And more importantly, I wanted no children to see the front of the building because there was some fatalities. Well, if you didn't think that app worked its magic, staff, Please, nobody come to the front. Please exit at the back of the building. Buses are going to be rerouted to the school next door. Can the first aid team please come immediately? And what it did is it created this wonderful sense that everyone got the same message at the same time, and that no one felt out of the loop. Nobody felt, oh, you got it, but I didn't get it, or I got it in writing, or I didn't hear it till 20 minutes later, that everybody got it. And it was interesting how the staff, at the end of the day, we got all the children home. Nobody was exposed to the horrific accident. Everyone got home on time. It was great. And I was able to communicate with the community saying, don't come pick up your children. That the staff was so proud of themselves for being able to adapt to a very difficult day. They couldn't have recess. The buses weren't normal. We were about 6 minutes leaving differently. Kids couldn't come to the office. But they were so proud of themselves because teachers often were very structured. We're done by bells. We're done by a schedule. But that particular day, nobody was upset because they missed a couple minutes of this period or they couldn't have recess outside, and that they had come together to adapt to a difficult situation. But structures need to be put in place for that to happen. You need to have timetables and bells and an app for communicating in order for people to feel safe. So when I think of a personal example and a school example, those go hand in hand for me.
Yeah. And if you look at trauma, that something can be traumatizing, and this was not, because everybody was able to come together in a unified way. And what could have been a terrible trauma where your teachers and your students could have had PTSD and
exposure.
Yeah, that something awful happened, but because of the response that you had, there was a sense of coming together. And I'm assuming that people were not traumatized because of that.
Yeah, no, I was, and the vice principal, because we were the first ones out, but I did not leave the side of the accident because this is how stubborn I am. I wanted to be able to say not a single child was exposed to that accident. I had the police put the cars in a certain way. So if a child by accident came out the front, they couldn't see. I had the other blue tarps put up over here because I knew it. The very next day I heard in the hall a girl say, well, I saw it. And I thought, no, you didn't. And I'm going to confront that because I don't want you to think that you saw it when I know you didn't, because I was there for 12 hours. I didn't leave that spot until the accident was cleared up and the people had been removed. I just was so stubborn that I wanted nobody to be exposed to what I had been exposed to, especially a child or especially one of our staff. Knowing, it must be 5 or 6 years later, I still think about it. I still have moments about it, but I look at it as a sense of pride that as the principal, the leader, that I was empathetic enough, that I was listening well enough, that I was adapting well enough, that I was humble enough to know what needed to happen in order to keep our school safe. So there's incidents and situations that happen in a leader's life where you need to use all the skills and all the competencies and all the knowledge.
Right. And some of that are the traits of being a highly sensitive person, that you were able to anticipate, do troubleshooting, projecting, and come up with a plan because of that depth of processing and insight. And, I'm not familiar with the training that principals get or what another principal would do, but I feel very confident in the fact that because those are traits that you have innately, that really assisted with whatever training and skills you have that I have no bloody clue about, in creating safety for your staff and for the kids.
I often explain to people that principal certification around the world is excellent, right? You get this cohort model, you get taught and facilitated by expert leaders and wonderful district superintendents. It's usually based on some sort of leadership model. In Canada, it's the Ontario Leadership Framework, or in the States, it's called the NELPS. But it's a lot of focus on managing finances, managing safety, managing the learning of the building, managing relationships, not so much on the leading. And so a lot of what I try and get people to think about when they're in a position where they have followers, which is really the definition of being a leader. Are you leading or are you just managing? Because there's a big difference. And I think some of the competencies we've talked about today show the difference. Telling is what a manager would do. Yelling is what a manager would do. Even though we want people to, what do you call it when you give a task to someone else?
Delegate.
Delegating is such a great skill, but often a manager delegates everything, including things that they should be done by themselves, as opposed to a leader who focuses on the relationships, who demonstrates the skills, who gets down and dirty with the followers, who's out there trying to prevent as opposed to respond to, which is where I spent a lot of my time as a principal, which was exhausting emotionally, physically, and mentally, was trying to predict. I would wake up in the night and go, okay, tomorrow is Friday the 13th and it's Valentine's Day and I don't have a vice principal. What is going to happen? What do I need to do right now in order to be prepared so that the school doesn't blow up, figuratively? Because that happened once. February the 13th, which also would then be Valentine's Day, because on the Saturday and I had no vice principal. And of course, the place went cuckoo bananas because I didn't think about other people that could have helped me. I was aware of the situation, but I didn't do anything to prevent it. I think about it, but now I actually try and lead through the situation by modeling what would be more appropriate, not just sitting eating cupcakes all day, but actually maybe doing some physical activities with all the school, those kinds of things. Yeah.
I want to do more competencies. I have more. Do you have more?
Yeah. You do one this time.
Okay. Resourceful.
Ooh, why is that important as a parent?
Because you got to think outside the box. Moms are the MacGyvers of the world.
Oh, that's so funny. That's 100% true.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's financial, friendships, food, you need to be able to be resourceful. Right? Vacations, this whole idea. As soon as someone invented staycations, I'm like, a parent invented staycations. That's brilliant. Right? It's the same in schools. How can we get donations? How can we get people power? How can we get decisions made? And I often, would say, who can we talk to? Who can we talk to? And I would snap my fingers to try and think, who is it? And then asking, what do you do? How do you do it? Where do you go? And calling a friend, right? It's just like that. Who wants to be a millionaire? Have you called a friend today? Right? Because they'll have 6 or 7 ideas too. And I think as parents, that's what I like about how social media can be a positive thing, is you can see some great things that other families are doing that you think, oh, we could do that as a family. We could play those games. We could do those activities. We could do that staycation. But you have to be open to it. And again, it's a little bit of humility sometimes. Right?
Yeah.
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 What do you think of the one that says flexible?
Well, I see that as being adaptable also.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this also ties in with the problem solving and being able to think outside the box. These are also some of our greatest strengths, because Dr. Aaron, who came up with the term highly sensitive person, said that we really have the ability to take 2 pieces of data and innovate something new, which is where I think the part of us that, I love problem solving. When I was getting into grad school, that we didn't need the logic on it, but that was the fun part, doing the logic. I feel like I'm a dog with a bone when I can use my brain to solve a problem. And I used to ask guests about play, and people would say, well, I don't play because we think of play as something physical and gregarious. But most of the HSPs that I interview like using our brains, that's relaxing.
I'll often ask people, are you a process person or a product person? Do you like to think about stuff and get dirty and muddle through things? Or do you like to build the thing? And I am the process person. I like to sit around the room, brainstorm, guess, think, draw, create, and then hand it off for someone else to make. So I believe we often are one or two. There's probably lots of people that like to do both, but I really like to be part of the process as opposed to the building or the product item.
Yeah, I'm a great idea person.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, I'd have a team behind me that would be able to follow. I come up with the idea, and then they would be able to do what it takes to follow through, because I get really bogged down in the details. And then it's not fun, because part of it is it's fun to think of new things.
Yes.
And the mundaneness of having to do things over and over sometimes is not that's not so fun.
Do you drive your partner nuts by saying, man, we really need a closet here? Because I've always wanted a partner that hears me say, man, that'd be great if we had a corner cupboard here. It could be the most beautiful pantry for the kitchen. And then we go away for the weekend and come back and it's built.
This is totally the wrong answer. My first husband was like that.
Oh, he was candy.
Well, and I can think in this little house that we lived in that there was this corner, and it would be perfect to have a shelf where we could put the phone on it, and boom, it was done. And I love my husband, and what I tell myself is, and I can't build things, so I can't fault him, that I have this amazing man. And if I need something built, I can find somebody to build it because I can't do it either.
Well, my love language is acts of service.
Mm-hmm.
And that also really makes me feel great. Like even when I would come home and the grass is cut, right? Which means our home looks beautiful and something's been done to make our home more beautiful. It's that act that I really like that someone's done. They've made the product, but my idea was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say when things don't get done, when the product doesn't get made, or I'm the one that then has to do the double duty, I don't do well. I get overwhelmed. I get upset. I get frustrated.
Yeah, my husband really provides stability for me. That we joke he's a much better wife than I am, and I'm a much better husband. And my kids are in college, and my husband manages all of the paperwork. And because he's military, the kids have school through him. I've told him, like, if Dad dies, y'all are just in really big trouble. That there will be no more Christmas. I don't know how to do the paperwork. That really he creates so much stability that it allows me to do the things that I do the best that are not typically traditionally female.
But it's 2021. I love that. Let's break through traditions and expectations in a gender role situation. Come on, it's 2021.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would not be here with you right now if I didn't have my amazing husband.
Awesome. That makes me very happy for you.
We are needing to wrap up a little bit. Did you have another?
No. Those were our top 10.
I want to have another conversation with you because there's so much we didn't discuss that I'm just excited about. What did we not talk about today that's important to cover?
From a perspective of being a highly sensitive person and being in a leadership role or being a leader?
Anything you want.
Well, my doctoral work is on adversity and resiliency. And being resilient is very important to me because we all have adversities. And there's two kinds of adversities: crises that happen in our lives and chronic. And crises, believe it or not, are easier to handle emotionally, mentally, and physically than chronic adversity. Because a crisis usually has a beginning, middle, and end. There's usually experts who are able to help you. There's usually lots of people to support you. But chronic problems, chronic people, chronic situations in our lives make it very difficult. So you need to be resilient. And we know the definition of resiliency, which is to come back and come back stronger. But there's three things that we need to do in order to make that happen. And when I think of being a highly sensitive person, these three skills to me align well with us feeling and staying well. And the three things are being physical daily, ensuring we're getting outside, we're moving, walking, yoga, swimming, etc. The second thing is having a confident, a critical friend, someone who's similar, either a parent to a parent or a sister to a sister or a principal to a principal, to confide in. Someone who's able to be empathetic towards you. And the last one, and this is the most important one to me, which is having a positive disposition. And when I think of myself and I think of the growth that I've tried to model and maintain over the last 15 years, I've been working really hard on myself. It's having that positive disposition that's so important to me. That waking up and knowing the sun has come up, my feet are touching the ground, the glass is half full. And I was lucky enough to grow up with a mother who, for some reason, is not capable of negativity. Everything is amazing. Everything is terrific. You're the best of that. Oh, that happened, but that's okay because we looked good. And even though there were times where you want someone to be suffering with you when you're a teen and you're like, this sucked, my mom was not able to ever go there. She was able to find the positive lining, and it drove me nuts as a teen. But man, am I happy that was my experience as an adult, because it's just been part of who I've become. And I know it drives other people nuts when they come to me and they want a pity party, or they want me to go down this rabbit hole. I'm like, well, that's okay, because look at and I find the silver lining. And that's part of that modeling as a leader. We want to be maintaining positive relationships that we show. We want to be able to have people we reach out to so that that humility remains the same. And that most importantly is that we're positive people, and that's the place of which we come from. So that's something that I spend a lot of time talking to. I actually often tell people about the lobster. You know, lobsters? Lobsters are extremely resilient. Lobsters are soft, mushy animals that grow inside a shell. And a fantastic rabbi named Dr. Twersky told this story about how they overcome adversity because of what they are, which is soft, mushy animals inside a rigid shell. The shell doesn't grow. Well, then how does a lobster grow if it's outside is a containment? As a lobster matures and it starts to feel contained and confined and uncomfortable, it sheds its shell and grows a new one. And then as they grow and mature again, and they start to feel contained and uncomfortable, they shed the next shell. And I often, when I talk to people and I share with people, I'm trying to get people to become more positive or overcome adversity, I say, shed your shell today. And that the stimulus for growth is actually being uncomfortable. That we can embrace and be okay being uncomfortable, knowing it's the time for us to bring about growth. And I'm all about this idea of the difference between growth and change. I don't want people to change. I just want people to grow, but grow like a lobster.
I love that. I love
Thanks.
that. Where can people find you if they want to know more about you?
I have multi social medias, all kind of for different purposes. So Twitter is important to me as an educational leader. It's where I share a lot of educational resources, things that Microsoft produces, celebrations of schools, etc. And I am Principal Zed on Twitter. Principal like school principal, and then Z-E-D. YouTube is just a series of videos that I have made for two purposes. One are my TikTok ones, and the other are keynotes and addresses and podcasts and things that I've done professionally, so people can rewatch them. Usually I'm able to share links and redo them. And then what's been popular with me since April is this idea of TikTok. And if you don't know what it is, I'm sure people are making some assumptions. It's about 16-year-old people dancing and being silly. But what it's turned into is an extremely informative platform of 15 to 1 minute videos that people are putting out either through with creativity and humor or real impactful stories, or what I'm trying to do, which is be educationally vulnerable, humorous, and informative. And I'm Dr. Zeisner on TikTok. And I've really been enjoying that. And I do a whole bunch of different kinds of series on me pretending to be different people in the school, me taking the alphabet and finding a different word every day that represents education, to resources, books, tools, and teaching ideas. And then it just sort of resonates with a whole bunch of different kinds of people. So any one of those platforms is great.
That sounds great. And why don't you spell Zeisner if somebody's driving right now?
Yeah, so Zeisner, like Michael Eisner, who used to own Disney, put a Z in front of it. So Z-E-I-S-N-E-R. So if you just Google that or you put it into any platform, there's only about 3 of us, my brothers and my uncle and I. And you'll see Catherine Zeisner or C. Zeisner or Dr. Zeisner.
Yeah. And what I love about TikTok is it's so uncurated compared to all the other forms of social media that there's just such an authenticity there. And because my life is starting to get a little tangled when I'm struggling in relationships, and some of the people I have relationships with are on different forms of social media. For right now, at least, TikTok is the only place that I know that they're not on. And I noticed that I've been making some TikToks that are only on TikTok that I usually, post to all of my platforms. And for today, it's the one place I can be a little vulnerable that I'm not in other places.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an unbelievable of community. We're talking 800 million users who are trying to protect the other 7,999,000 other followers. For some reason, people want everyone to be allowed to be themselves on that platform. And if there is any judgment from anyone in any way, people destroy them. And I've been lucky enough that I've only ever had 2 people be very disrespectful, but I trusted my followers enough to be able to reach out to them and say, well, that's not acceptable. And you need to watch her other videos and you don't understand what you're talking about and go away. I've been really lucky and feel very protected, but just to allow me to be creative right now when I've been alone since March, I spend a lot of my day in academics and being scholarly work. To be silly for a minute really is helping my mental health. To even share my vulnerability is also helping my emotional health. And then to celebrate others makes me just feel great. And to be silly, like I'm doing a whole series of me trying to date people, but like Batman.
Movie stars.
Yeah,
Movie
yeah,
stars.
just being silly. And, it's making people happy. And
Yeah.
often when I was a principal, I didn't get to make too many people happy. And I'm really pleased I can do that now. So yeah, I've been enjoying it, but it is just silly fun. But I'm trying to help lots of people in education too.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This has been fun, and we didn't get to everything I wanted to. So, dang.
Well, then I'm going to come back.
I think I'd like that.
Okay, good. Awesome.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye. Hey again. So what did you think? I love this conversation so much that Dr. Zeisner and I are going to be recording again next week. We're going to hold the episode for a little while, but we're going to talk a little bit more about education and some of the changes and really how to make education more equitable for everybody. I just really love her content. The qualities that we didn't get to are believing in your team and having trust, and that's with relationships as well. Being able to motivate your team, and we often do that just by showing up the way that we are. Being compassionate, consistent, not having a bias, being kind, being a learner who is genuinely curious. Most HSPs have that curiosity. Being respectful, inclusive, passionate, and service-oriented. If you are going to make a list, I would really encourage you to add these to your list because it's how we're wired. It's how we come. I want to address when Dr. Zeisner talks about the 3 aspects of resiliency, and the third one was a positive disposition. And like I said, we did not get a chance to talk about this, so this is no disrespect to Dr. Zeisner. What my belief is that we can hold the tension of frustration, disappointment, letdowns, anger, all of the feels because we are deeply feeling people. It's not about bypassing that and just moving to the positivity. And I often talk about what Justine Folker talked about as both and. If you were in front of me, I have both of my palms up, and on the left hand, I've got the frustration, the disappointment, whatever those uncomfortable feelings are. And in the right hand is more of what Dr. Zeisner is talking about. What do I have control over? How can I manage? What are my strengths? What am I grateful for? And we can hold the tension between the two. For highly sensitive people to abandon and to try and do a bypass, if you listen to the episode with Sarah Bueno, I think it's episode 101, we talk about spiritual bypass. Because we are such deeply thinking, deeply feeling people, we really need to be able to embrace all of the feelings and not get out of balance with one or the other. If we need to process, if we need to think things out, if we need to figure things out, that is perfectly acceptable. And it's about remembering that we can come back to balance, and it's not about doing it perfectly. We can hold both of those things. And I think the tension between the two, and Dr. Zeisner talks about when she gives the analogy of the lobster, it's okay to be uncomfortable. We can manage distress tolerance, we can tolerate uncomfortable feelings, and we can still make decisions that work for us. I hope that's helpful. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the presidential inauguration was today. I did not realize how much tension I had been holding until I watched it, and I have not been a particularly political person for most of my life. These last 4 years, especially this last year, I've gotten much more involved. I don't know about anybody else, but I cried my eyes out and was really rather tired today because I just almost let out a huge exhale. Just a sense of like, I have been holding on to so much tension, and we are living history. I'm a little done with living history, and history was made today. And I am so pleased to see that we have a female vice president. We have more people of color and indigenous people and more diversity in the White House. I just am experiencing some hope today, and I'm just wondering, for those of you that watched the inauguration, how was it for you? I always like to talk about what's going on because it can be very normalizing and validating, and from the highly sensitive therapists that I'm seeing online today, that this seems to be the consensus that we're just letting out a big exhale. If you are struggling with your trait of high sensitivity, maybe you just learned about the trait, maybe this year has just been brutal for most of us, I do teach an online course for HSPs. If you want information, you can look in the show notes, or you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a tab for the HSP groups page. You will learn about your trait. We cover topics like boundaries and perfectionism, mindfulness, turning the negative messages into superpowers, creating a lifestyle that honors the HSP, learning how to communicate authentically. There are 10 modules. These have been incredibly transformative, and I think the most healing part comes from being with a group of other people that are wired like you, not all the same, in a really safe environment, and learning that so much of what we experience that we've internalized that we don't even know that we've internalized, to see other people sharing those experiences. And what I often do when people share is when there's a break, I'll say, who else feels overwhelmed? Who else feels like they talk too much? Who else feels like what they do is annoying? Whatever it is that we're talking about, I ask the group with a show of hands, and the relief that you can see on people's faces. And the reason why many of these people took the course is to learn more about the trait, but also to connect with other HSPs. When we have that corrective experience of being in a small group that's safe and we feel seen and heard and we find out what's possible, we can take that into relationships outside in the world and really know what's possible, because many of us didn't have the ideal situation growing up, or it was good enough, or we've struggled with relationships. We tend to be givers in relationships. Our relationships aren't always reciprocal. They aren't always as healthy. We get messages if we tell people how we feel that they're not okay with it, or we're making a big deal out of things. To be in an environment to talk about these conflicts and to get mirroring and reflection from me and the other group members, it is just incredibly healing. So the next group of courses will start the first week in April of 2021. Just giving you a heads up. My hope is that you're doing well. This will be coming out right after Valentine's Day. How was Valentine's Day for you? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Does it suck? Did you take care of yourself? I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. Thank you so much to Shelly Aaron Productions, who is doing part of the editing on this. If you have any video or audio that you need editing, totally recommend her. You can find her in the show notes. Thank you so much, Shelly. You keep me organized and together. I really appreciate it. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.